I didn't know this whole time Taylor Swift was technically signed to an independent label. Traditionally, musicians cover other artists' music and create a new master from that. Taylor Swift is doing it to herself just to get back at the label, which is smart, and it makes you wonder why artists before her hadn't done that. Peace, what's going down? It's DJ Payne 1, joined by Dame Ritter. This is the Music Entrepreneur Club podcast, episode 11. We made it to the lucky number. What's going down, Dame?
What up? Feeling good today, man. I'm looking forward to jumping into some of these topics. We got some good ones queued up, so I'm excited. We've also been having some really dope weekly live sessions, man. We've had some really cool guests on. We've had Corinne Campbell from Indiepreneur. We have Saba's manager coming up on Monday. We've just been having some really great, insightful conversations and, raising the quality of conversation around music, having some smarter conversations so that hopefully people are learning and applying it to their business so they can actually have a business as opposed to a hobby. So, man, we've been on a roll. So, and these podcasts are a part of that. So I'm looking forward to discussing these topics today as well.
And special shout out to Audio MEC. It's a platform that we started using when we first began this podcast. I've been using it forever though, just for music, because I like it better than SoundCloud because it's free and they don't give you any kind of limitations on how much you can upload. And we have about 5,000 regular listeners on Audio MEC. So shout out to not only the platform but all the listeners checking out the MEC podcast on the platform.
And they recently did a deal, I think, with Warner, so they're definitely making moves. I think the Audio MEC, if your music's not already on Audio MEC, it needs to be there. But with all the moves and partnerships that they're making, I think that they're going to become a much more relevant streaming platform. So get on early, like we always say, man. When something starts, if a new social media platform starts or anything new starts, it's always good to be a first user or a first responder to these things and jump on early. I mean, Audio MEC has been around for a minute, so it's not like it's new, but a lot of new things are happening. So get your music on there and check it out.
So to kick things off, let's talk QC. Founded and run by Coach K. It's a very famous management group, but they're going through some transitions, and this harkens back to all the stuff that you've talked about, how managers get, and I agreed with you, this was never an argument. We argue about everything but not this. Managers definitely get the short end of the stick in a lot of scenarios when they're working with artists. Yeah,
and I think that, and sometimes managers can take advantage of situations, so it's never, I try to go to bat for the managers, not just given what I've been through, but because of the things that I've seen. And it's funny, man, like I'm working on doing the second version of this 1 week notice project where we fly artists to a city and have them create a project in a week. And I've been having these conversations with managers like for the past year, and I just haven't been able to get this project off the ground for various reasons. However, it is going to happen. And I've started circling back to some of the initial artists that I've reached out to, and so many of them don't work with the artist anymore. It's crazy, and I don't know what has happened in these particular situations, but a lot of times managers just get let go and cut off, and that's kind of what Coach K was talking to in this recent interview with Rob Markman, this Rap Genius interview. And they were talking about why they started a label and a publishing company. And essentially it was because, time and time again, they would work with an artist, put all their time and resources into an artist. And then at some point, maybe they got mad, or maybe somebody kind of got in their ear and they thought a better situation was somewhere else, but they just left them. And as a manager, you can put all your time and energy into something. If you just have a management agreement in place, they essentially can leave. You have no equity. You have no ownership in that. You're really just making a commission, but you're building up an artist, that could potentially leave at any point for maybe no reason at all. So to protect themselves, they started the label, the publishing company. So if and when artists do decide to leave, there still is something to gain from all of the hard work that they've put into that artist. And to me, that just makes so much sense, and it's a lot fair, especially when you're dealing with artists from zero. You know, if you're dealing with artists from zero and you're building that artist up and you're going through the levels, you're getting them from 0 to 8. You know, I feel like you should be able to profit from that after, you know, the relationship severs.
Yeah, and just a couple of things to add. You know, we don't know what's going on in QC. We don't know what the grievances might be, so we're not taking sides. But I've been on both sides of the fence. As a manager, I've only really formally managed somebody once, and it was miserable. They spat in my face after I did all this stuff for them and severed the contract, and you know, I didn't walk away with anything. And then on the other hand, I've had managers. I've never had a bad manager. I've never had a manager take advantage of me in a way that I thought was unfavorable or exploitative. But I've had managers try. I remember one said, "Hey, I'm going to shop your beats, but I get 50% of everything. 50% of the advance, 50% of the publishing." I was like, nah, I don't think so. You know, because I think there's common ground. We can all find common ground. But a lot of us remember the extremes. You know, I remember the time the artist cussed me out and tore the contract up. And I didn't do anything wrong. And I remember the time when the manager tried to prey on me and try to take 50% of my real estate when he didn't compose a single note. But all the middle stuff, I think, is kind of what we need to talk more about, you know, because I've worked with tons of managers that my very first placement, that was just standard. He took 20% of the advance, and he probably deserved more, if I'm being completely honest, because that was my first placement. But at the same time, neither of us really knew what the hell we were doing. We were just hungry and we were working hard. So I do think managers deserve more, but then I also think that there's this whole stigma on both ends where managers think artists are these spoiled brats that want everything, and artists think managers are these evil, suit-wearing zombies that just siphon money out of you and drain your creativity and make you do all this Illuminati blood sacrifice.
Right. I mean, ultimately, like, you know, going back to my situation with Funk Volume, like, I'm glad that I started the label and was an owner in the label, because Hop was so volatile, and I knew that. I mean, I didn't think that the label would end.
Yeah, the comments are going to be crazy every time you bring this Hop stuff up. The comments,
but it's relevant to this conversation, bro, because I mean, it's essentially the exact same thing. Like, I was there from day one. Like, I literally would pay his rent at times. I'm the one that put in all of the money to start Funk Volume, and every dollar that went into it for the first 2 years was mine. So if I just had a management agreement with Hop, and then, you know, literally 8 years later, you know, I'm gonna tell you, even more so than the money. Like, I was the one that drove these cats around when we first started touring. I was the one that set up the first tour, set up the website. I did so much for Funk Volume. Like, if the 8 years later, Hop gets upset because I tell him he doesn't work that hard, you're going to tell me that you can just say, okay, you don't work that hard, my ego's upset, I'm going to leave, and I'm just going to leave with nothing? Like, that would have been the worst situation ever if I just had a management agreement, you know, after putting in all of that work. That would have been fucking ridiculous, you know? So I'm glad that I protected myself. But at the time, you know, I didn't have the experience that a Coach K has. I was just looking at it from like a common sense business perspective, you know, and I know that funding is not necessarily a part of a management agreement, and ultimately that was like my mindset. I was like, look, if I'm putting money into this, then I'm definitely getting ownership in this situation. So it wasn't, you know, how I was setting things up wasn't based off of experience in the music industry, because that was my first, you know, experience in the music industry, just kind of jumping in. To me, that's just what made sense, you know, from a business perspective, looking at it. But I'm super glad that I protected myself, because a lot of these artists do have like heavy egos or have mental issues and things like that, and they can get mad at the drop of a dime and be like, okay, F you, you know, I'm leaving. And that's tough. That's a tough pill to swallow for a manager that's been, you know, building an artist especially again if it's starting from day one.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely happened to me, and I'm seeing that happen to somebody else. I didn't invest money in the artists I managed. I invested a lot of time, which is
same thing, but it's the same.
Yeah,
That's
it's the same thing. But I know the same story with, because I didn't know you were, investing in the startup costs. I didn't know you were paying people's rents, and I see managers do this all the time, and it just becomes kind of a given to the artist when you start to treat the artist as though, I hate the word, and it comes up, babysitting. When you babysit the artist, and people get offended, and I know there were a bunch of interviews recently. One was Taz Taylor, where he said he babysat his artist, and people freaked out. Honestly, sometimes you're babysitting artists. Artists just want to make music, and they don't want to do the other stuff. Okay, cool. But I understand if it's my money and it's my resources and it's my energy that's going to get your art to people and allow you to continue making art without getting a day job and without doing all of this hard work yourself, then yes, I'm doing more work than you are. So I understand those frustrations, but the dynamic is so strange, and it's so volatile, and it's so crazy, because you have everyone comes to the table with a different perception about what a manager is supposed to do, and I'm almost mad at the managers that put money in an artist's pocket, because like if when I started making beats and some manager came by and was like, hey, I'm gonna pay your rent, and all you have to do is make beats, I would be spoiled, and it would take a lot of work for me to get out of that mindset of expecting that a manager is there to basically cater to my whims, and I'm the creative and I'm the guy that everybody should answer to. And I've had managers offer me money, but that was later on in my career, and I was smart enough to say, you know what, I don't need money. I'm coming to the table with my talents and with my back catalog, and whatever you can do with that, that's what you do. And we agree upon a very fair arrangement. Because if it's unfair slanting towards me or unfair slanting to the manager, as you say, it's going to be all bad, and something negative is going to happen, and it's going to affect both of us. And no matter what, even if I'm getting out of a bad situation, it's going to affect me. Severing ties is always a lot of work and a lot of strain on your network at large and your brand too.
Right. And I just want people to know, like, managers putting money into the situation is not the norm. I mean, that shouldn't be the expectation. And I know some managers do, and I know when they do, they have different agreements. But if I ever put money into a situation, I'm expecting some type of equity or ownership in that situation, just like any business in any other industry, So I just don't want people to get the perception that, I'm looking for a manager to fund what I have going on. That's not normal. I didn't pay Hops rent every month, but I definitely did it on occasions where he didn't have the money to do it. And I just wanted to make sure he had a place to live so that we can continue trying to build this Funk Volume thing, because it did take, probably 2 years plus before we started to see even $1. So, I just didn't want to see him just in that situation. But yeah, so I just wanted to bring because I thought it was a dope interview. Coach K obviously has a very successful label, a lot of experience, somebody that I respect and admire. I don't know personally, but just respect and admire from afar. And they continue to kill it.
So speaking of labels and speaking of managers, we're a little late on this, but I really wanted to understand the situation as much as I could. Taylor Swift is making headlines once again because she's basically maneuvering around the labels and kind of getting the last word on a nightmare situation, and it's one of those situations that really causes a lot of fear in the recording artist community. And I think this is actually a good story, because there are a lot of lessons about the music business that we can learn from what Taylor Swift has gone through and how she resolved it. I don't know if you're too familiar with it, but yeah, she she's re-recording her songs so that she can make money off of them, because her former label was bought out by a manager, Scooter Braun, who she has major beef with and has for a while. He bought her masters, and in order to prevent him from making money off of selling her back catalog, she's going to re-record her back catalog and start selling that. So a whole bunch of topics come out of this, because people want to know how she can do that. People want to know why that works. People want to know why the label owns her masters. So let's break some stuff down. Let me tell you what blew my mind. I didn't know this whole time Taylor Swift was technically signed to an independent label.
Yeah, I knew that piece. So I'm actually looking forward to learning from you about this, because this is the first time I've heard of somebody trying this, and I would like to just better understand like how it works.
My mind is still blown that she was signed to an independent. That means all her biggest records to date were released independently. And
But they, I'm pretty sure they had a partnership with a major, though.
They have distribution through UMG, which is the largest label on the planet, but it's still technically an independent label. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because I did do my research, as I do, in spite of what the people in the comments section say. There are only 3 major labels on the planet. One is UMG, they're the largest by far. The other is Warner, and then the third is Sony. There used to be a lot more. There used to be EMI. There used to be, God, I forget what the other ones were, but there were quite a few, and they've all gotten eaten up. A lot of them got eaten up by Sony. A lot of them got eaten up by Warner. And just to put this into very clear terms, a major label, by definition, is a multinational company that owns and controls over 5% of the world's market. 5% of the world's market doesn't seem like much, but it's a hell of a lot when you consider what kind of catalog these majors have. So to put it in perspective, there's this label in India called T-Series. They're, I think, the biggest YouTube channel, so you can see that they have influence internationally. They're not considered a major label, though. Even though they control a lot of Bollywood music, which is the most prolific film genre on the planet, they have an annual revenue of, let's say it's 100 million. Something like that. That's what I could find by researching it. Universal Music Group's annual revenue is over 7 billion. So to put that into perspective, that's a major label. So, $100 million annual revenue is considered independent, which is kind of crazy. And I think there should be some kind of middle ground, obviously. And when we're talking about Taylor Swift's former record label, they obviously made a killing, and she's not the only superstar that was signed to them, but they're certainly not considered a major, even though they have distribution from a major label. So anyway, going back to the core of this conversation, so she did something tricky, right? What I don't like about the conversation is that a lot of people are freaked out by the fact that her masters were bought up, because it makes it seem like somebody stole them from her. She didn't own those to begin with. Let's be completely clear. When you sign to a label, in the vast majority of all cases, you're selling your masters to the label because the label is investing in you and is investing in the promotion of your work so that you can make money. We talked about this last episode, which is that there are 2 copyrights that every music creator owns when they create a song. One is the composition, one is the master. The label takes the master, the artist controls the composition themselves, unless they sign a separate deal with a publisher. Now, the publishing deal is like a record label for your composition. The record deal is a deal for your master. So we're familiar with the traditional record deal, which is signing to a label like Atlantic Records or something. And Atlantic is under the Warner umbrella, and that makes sense to us. But the publishing doesn't make sense. But really, it's the same concept. It's just 2 sides of the same coin. Label deal is for your master. Publishing deal is basically a label deal, but for your composition rights, and those are your 2 copyrights. But that means that you can have a publishing deal with one company and a label deal with a totally separate company, which is actually the case with Taylor Swift. So she's signed to Universal Republic. Before she was signed to Big Machine Records. And she had a publishing deal, and she renewed it, I believe, last year or maybe the year prior. She had a publishing deal with Sony ATV. So she's signed to Universal as an artist, but she's signed to Sony ATV as a publisher. Sony and Universal are two totally different companies. That means these are two different sets of rights. Therefore, she sells her masters to the label, Big Machine Records. They do whatever they want with them. They sold them to Scooter Braun for, I believe, $300 million. Right? So some articles make it seem like those were stolen from her. No, they were sold by the person who owns them, which was the label, not Taylor Swift herself. Anyway, how do you get out of that? Well, she was tricky because the masters are just the recorded versions of your song. So if someone covers your music, that's a brand new master. If I wanted, let's not talk about me. If Dame wants to do a cover version of Taylor Swift's Trouble, which I think, it's either that or Boys to Men.
If I was to cover anything, it's going to be a Boys to Men song. So we could do, if I was to cover Boys to Men, do that. What's your favorite Boys to Men song? Because you were starting to tell me, but you wouldn't. It was like this big secret. No, it's not even a secret. I don't even have one favorite.
One that you don't hate because you don't like Motown Philly.
We can do 4 Seasons of Loneliness.
Okay. That's dark, Dame. So 4 Seasons of Loneliness, Dame covers that. Because he re-records it and it's his voice and it's new instrumentation, it's a new recording that's different from the original Boys to Men recording. That's a brand new master. Right. But what he did was he took the underlying composition, which is the lyrics and the notes and everything that made the original version, but not the recorded material. He didn't sample it. And so now he's created his own master. And now he owns that master, but he doesn't own the composition. He has to go back to Boys to Men and whoever controls the publishing of that and figure out, how to negotiate within that. So this is why it works for Taylor Swift. She can do the same thing for her own catalog. Traditionally, musicians cover other artists' music and create a new master from that. Taylor Swift is doing it to herself, just to get back at the label, which is smart, and it makes you wonder why artists before her hadn't done that. Because we hear about all kinds of artists, from Prince to Paul McCartney, fighting for their entire careers to get their masters back from their labels. And they just can't do it. They signed them away, and the label's not going to give them up because these are superstars. They're generating a lot of money off of the master ownership. But I wonder why they couldn't re-record their music and just re-release it. Probably because they were still signed to that label, and so they had to continue releasing music under that label, and the label would never let them do it. What Taylor Swift did was she switched labels and then got back at her label by re-recording her masters.
And because she owns her publishing, she only needs permission from herself.
And her publisher, but it seems like she has a really good relationship with Sony ATV. The other thing Taylor Swift did, and she can do this because she has so much leverage, is with her new deal with Republic, she actually owns her masters. I don't know what the specifics are. I didn't see the agreement. None of us did, but that's what's being reported. So she was...
That's not a surprise because, I mean, at that point, if you're Taylor Swift status, you probably can dictate whatever the hell you want, out of a deal. She only gave her masters up in the first place because she was an unproven artist in the beginning, and she wasn't the Taylor Swift that we know now. So that makes sense. But I think it's clever. I think that, if you're set up in this way, if you switch the labels, if you have the funding to be able to do it, I would imagine, however, they're not pulling the originals down. She's going to have to
compete.
She's going to have to release it, and there's going to be 2 versions of the same song, and she's going to probably encourage her fans to playlist or listen to the new stuff that she puts out. And
they're going to. And I think it's a great story for her. I mean, she's rich; she doesn't need our money. So this is more of a middle finger to her former associates. But here's something that I also found out, which was interesting. I didn't know this when I was researching this whole buying back your masters thing. There's this provision of the Copyright Act of 1976. Yeah, the U.S. Copyright Act of 1976 allows artists to terminate copyright transfers 35 years after a copyright deal was originally inked. Congress included the provision as an artist's second chance to regain music rights if they felt that they made a disadvantageous first deal, according to the NYU Law Review. So basically, if Taylor had waited 35 years, she could have theoretically gotten her masters back somehow. But I think that's probably not as easy as it sounds. It's probably not just after 35 years you get them back. It's after 35 years they have to negotiate with you, and so you have to deal with that. So apparently, I'll continue reading. Paul McCartney, who lost his catalog to Michael Jackson way back, is about to get his chance to do so somehow. The termination date is October 2025. So I guess we'll see how that goes for him. That'll be interesting. Yeah, because this law is relatively new. When we're talking about the history of the music business, this is new stuff. And things are only going to get more complicated as artists find ways to navigate around certain bad, not so favorable deals that they signed and navigate their way around the business. I think that's something that is also new. It's this mentality that artists have to learn the business themselves, whereas I think 20, 30, 40, 50, certainly 100 years ago, artists made music. They didn't understand the business. They got used. Sometimes they got used. Oftentimes they did, and that has shifted. That's a paradigm shift that we're seeing now. And so these articles come out, and I hope that people read them and don't just take the headlines and the surface level information at face value and actually dig deeper, especially if they're artists themselves. If you're an artist yourself and you read this thing about Taylor Swift, rather than just filling in the blanks with information that you're guessing at, you can do the research, because like I said, I learned a lot just from this situation. I learned about this provision in the U.S. Copyright Act that I was not previously aware of. So this is all going to be interesting to see, but it's cool. I like situations such as these because it taught us about masters, it taught us about label deals, it taught us about copyright law, and it taught us about publishing. You're welcome. Thank you, Taylor.
And I think the other thing it did for her is it just created a story for her fans to rally around, right? Like, this is in the news, it's giving her additional coverage. All this attention translates to streams and sales for her. So from a marketing perspective, this is great. This is great for her. This attention is great. It did give some people some education, but I still think, the masses, or most people, or even people in the music industry, are still kind of unclear on what exactly happens when, especially around, artists saying, you should own all this stuff around. You should own your masters, you should own your music. Like, labels shouldn't own anything. And it's like, if you look at any other business when it comes to master ownership or whatever, like, if you invest money into any other business, you invest money into this product, you spend hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars to get this product out to the world, like, there's gonna be ownership for whoever invested that money into that product, right? But now we look at music, because the product is a brand, the product is music, there's more emotion there. We seem to think that it's not fair that these labels own either a percentage or even all of the masters, depending on how much money and resources went into getting that out to the world, right? To me, I know that United Masters likes to harp on this because it's part of their brand. They're always posting things about the importance of owning your masters and things like that. Yeah, if you want to own your masters, don't accept a label deal, right? However, a lot of the artists that we know today, we would never have known about them had they not had the millions of dollars invested in them, and the labels want a return on that. So to me, it's such a ridiculous conversation sometimes around and because it's called master, like people take the word master and they equate it to like slave ownership and like the master and slave dynamic. It's really not that deep. It's really not. Every other industry operates this way. Like if you develop some type of drug and you wanted to get it out to the world, you're going to need probably big pharma to get it on the level of a Viagra. And if that happens, big pharma is going to be part of this process. They're going to own if a big part of, or if not all of, whatever you developed.
Just to be clear, big pharma is way more evil than the music industry.
Yeah, I agree. But it's the first example that came to mind. It's like it happens in every industry. It's just more emotional when it's tied to music because I guess it's seen as more of like a personal product. But this master conversation really gets blown out of proportion, especially when you don't understand that the artist owns the publishing side of it, or should own the publishing side. So if they didn't give up the publishing, their publishing ownership, which they shouldn't do, they still have ownership in their composition, right? And that's never talked about. And I don't even think that's ever even understood by most people. So any education around master ownership, publishing versus is a great thing. But people are going to continue to be stupid because there's people harping and like marketing based off of that, like that master slave relationship. United Masters is definitely taking advantage of that. And I hate when I see some of their promotion because it continues to miseducate people, in my opinion.
Well, on that note, if you don't want to be misinformed, there are a lot of good resources if you want to learn more about master versus composition ownership, publishing. Song Trust has a ton of free resources. They have guides on and flowcharts on the differences in the various royalties generated in the agencies that collect on those royalties from each copyright. Just check the Song Trust website. Those are free. And then of course we have this thing. It's a music business entrepreneurship mentorship program. MusicEntrepreneurClub.com. We talk every week with producers, with managers, with aspiring artists, recording artists, and so forth. And we have guests, we have workshops, we have collaborative sessions, we have all types of stuff, and we dive into these topics. And it's pretty intimate, so you do get to ask questions and have your issues and concerns addressed. And that's, I think, a big advantage of what we offer, because it's not just some kind of forum where you're getting information from just anybody. We've had everybody from the VP at Warner to entertainment attorneys come on to give our members individual attention, answer their questions, and all of that is archived. So if you joined today and you missed the session with the Warner Brothers VP, you can still access that. MusicEntrepreneurClub.com.
We basically exist to have a community where you can get good quality information. Just because there's a lot of bad information out there, we just try to be a platform where you can learn from established professionals on a weekly basis. You can engage and talk with them, ask questions. It's really, to me, a one-of-a-kind platform, and it's something that's very needed. So please join us. Check out our live sessions. We're going to continue the MEC tour next year. That's something that we've added that's really dope component to our community. And then just join our Facebook group and our Instagram page, because there's a lot of networking and interaction and knowledge that gets shared in on those platforms as well. So we've grown substantially over the past couple of years, and we plan to keep it rocking in 2020 for sure.
Appreciate all of you listening. It's the MEC podcast. I'm DJ Payne, one joined by Dame Ritter. We will catch you on the next episode. Peace.
Peace. Is this going to be on the podcast or fill in the space here?